Avengers! Assemble.
The MCU blockbusters that we know and love seem perfect, like they were conceived in heaven and dropped off in the movie theater by a stork. It's easy to forget the fact that for the cast and crew, this was work. They had to show up every day and shoot some very difficult scenes. In honor of these people, we'll be taking a look at some of the most impossible filming moments from the MCU. How did the cast and crew make everything work?
I don't want this winding up in the wrong hands.
When you think of scenes that are hard to film, your mind probably jumps to ones like the final battle in Avengers Endgame, or any number of other movies like from Return of the King to Braveheart, and with good reason. Not only are these big action set pieces the bread and butter of blockbuster movies, they're also a huge logistical pain. There's the choreography, which involves dozens of people who have to look like they're really hitting each other, even in the background of the shot. There has to be continuity between all these people and their actions throughout different camera angles. If you think remembering lines is hard, try remembering a complex chain of different punches, blocks, parries, lunges, and the fake reactions to being hit. It's like the San Andreas unlimited ammo cheat code, but you have to do it with your body. L1, R1, square, R1, left, R2, R1, left, square, down, L1, L1. Add to this the challenge of getting a cast of dozens of very busy superstars in the same studio together at the same time to film just one scene of a movie, and you've got your hands very full. Even though the battle scene must have been a huge production, it turns out that it wasn't even the most inconvenient scheduling conflict of Endgame. The hardest cast wrangling moment came from what may be the least serious scene in the whole film, when Black Widow, Captain America, and Ant-Man go to meet the newly synthesized Bruce Banner Hulk in the diner. You may remember Professor Hulk taking some selfies with fans. They don't want one with Ant-Man. These kids were the source of all the trouble. Anthony Russo explained that one is my son Julian, one is my brother's daughter Leah, one is my sister's son Augie. As you can probably guess, it wasn't the kids' professional commitments to other pressing projects that caused the problem. Rather, it was their school schedules. Finding a day where all three of them would be able to miss class without skipping an important quiz or due date proved much harder than expected, and was, Russo said, the hardest scheduling task of all. A lot of characters in the MCU are completely made up of CGI, and working them into scenes with real flesh and blood humans can be a challenge. Take the one in the diner with Smart Hulk, for example. In every scene that had somebody talking to the Hulk, they would have to know where to look so that it would look natural after the CGI was added in. So Mark Ruffalo had to walk around wearing a weird contraption. It was not just a regular old motion capture suit, it had a pole that attached to the back and stuck out over the top of his head. On top of this pole sat a tennis ball, which stood in for Hulk's face. Not only was it tough for Ruffalo to walk around in this unbecoming, cumbersome getup, but the other actors must have been hard-pressed to express their emotions to a tennis ball. Another instance of this balance between live action and CGI is in the opening to Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where Baby Groot dances to ELO while the rest of his crew engage in a raging battle behind him. Now, first of all, it was probably quite the challenge to animate a tree dancing and make it look all natural, so kudos to the VFX team for that. But even harder was accounting for the baby tree on set when no one could even see him yet. The movie's cinematographer, Henry Bram, described how even though a lot of it was CGI, he said, quote, in almost every part of that scene, there will be live action footage, end quote. This causes a lot of headaches, he said, because, quote, you're allowing space for the animated characters within the frame, end quote. This kind of special imagination is not usually demanded from cinematographers, and it's a wonder that the Guardians got it done without too many hitches, considering a huge portion of the movie's cast is invisible until post-production.
I am Groot.
Spiders and water don't mix. But even so, when Tom Holland saw that there was a scene in which Spider-Man, or his double, would get dropped out of a helicopter and into a lake, he insisted on doing the stunt himself, saying, and I quote, let me do it, end quote. The scene in question is the one in Spider-Man Homecoming, where the Vulture drops Peter out of the sky and into the Hudson River. Tom Holland is no Jackie Chan, and so predictably, the production team didn't let him do the stunt and opted to go for a professional stunt double instead. Holland said, quote, when I saw him do it and get dunked in the lake, I'm so happy I let him do that one because that was the scariest thing I've ever seen, end quote. Thinking back to all the dangerous things Captain America did in the MCU, it's obvious how they filmed the scenes. Just like in Spider-Man with a stunt double. But what about the scene where Cap goes back in time and runs into himself? This fight was a tough nut to crack, but coincidence saved the day. It just so happens that the stunt double for Chris Evans, Daniel Hargrave, has a brother who is also a stunt double. Marvel hired both of them to face off, brother versus brother, as the future and past versions of Captain America. Apparently, members of the cast, including Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson, were mixing up their names, as many viewers would have done too if it weren't for the clever visual clues. Not all scenes that were difficult to film involved grand action set pieces or daredevil stunts. Some of them were the exact opposite. This one in particular came in the first Iron Man film, where Tony Stark builds his arc reactor while stuck in the cave. You could almost consider this scene the birth of the whole MCU, as it is, in a way, the birth of Tony's character. At rock bottom, literally in a cave, he uses his technological genius to build his way out and become Iron Man, who later becomes the leader of the Avengers. If this scene wasn't convincing, then none of the rest of the series would have been. To make it seem as authentic as possible, Marvel's prop master, Russell Bobbitt, said that he had to get specific with the actual technology, even though the reactor itself isn't real. He said, quote, "I taught him how wiring works," end quote. He taught him the hands-on skills that he actually uses in the shots. He said, quote, "He soldered, and we have these extreme close-up shots, and it really defined Iron Man in that moment." End quote. Bobbitt describes it as the most challenging scene that he's worked on. We're glad he did though, otherwise things could have been very different. There was another prop-related challenge in the MCU, not because of the technical challenge of building something, but rather because they were constantly changing size. In Ant-Man and the Wasp, Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly grow and shrink, but there's one scene in particular where Rudd's suit malfunctions and his size begins to warp unpredictably. Lily's size is also changing in the scene as she tries to help and keep up with Rudd. Rudd told Radio Times that they had to, quote, "mix different size props because Evangeline and I are both in the scene at the same time," end quote. Coordinating exactly what size of prop at what precise moment became very challenging. He continued saying, quote, "She's handing me a backpack, I'm grabbing a backpack, I'm handing things to her, but we have to pinpoint the exact location of our hands," end quote. So to solve this, they used two techniques. One was good old-fashioned trial and error, the other was more technically advanced. It was the only time during the whole production that they had to use motion control cameras, which was complicated. The director, Peyton Reed, bemoaned the fact that he had to use a lot of programming and higher mathematics. The final product looks great though. The first scene in Avengers Endgame is Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye on his ranch teaching his daughter how to shoot a bow and arrow. Emotional turmoil aside, you might think that this was the least taxing scene that Jeremy Renner had to film in his tenure as the MCU's Hawkeye. And think again. Apparently, he shot all of Endgame with 2 broken arms. Imagine trying to do anything with 2 broken arms. Eating a steak, texting your friends, putting on pants would all be a challenge. But Renner filmed a major role in the highest grossing film of all time in this condition. The accident happened on the set of Tag, the movie he was shooting right before Endgame. While filming a chase scene, he fell off a stack of chairs and cracked both arms, but the next day, he showed up to set with 2 casts on and then continued filming like nothing happened. The casts were simply edited out in post-production. As soon as Tag wrapped, Renner went straight on to Endgame. When asked about why keep going with 2 broken arms, Renner said, quote, "What else do you do? You just stop and cry and everyone go home? You know what I mean? It'd be like, sorry guys, I'm not going to use a bow and arrow now in Avengers. It's silly, so I kind of have to push through so that you can perform for everyone," end quote. This is true enough. Even though he was in pain, doing physical therapy every day, something as big as the final Avengers film does not stop for one man. Every actor faced their own specific challenges while filming their respective Marvel films, especially the franchise's marquee star, Robert Downey Jr. The most difficult scenes for him to act weren't his emotional moments with Tom Holland or his wellness guru wife. They were the moments where his face was shown isolated in his mask. The Iron Man suit looks very cool, but it's not the most emotive piece of technology. To show the man behind the machine, the filmmakers decided to film Downey's face and add the suit's heads-up display after the fact to show that he is indeed inside his Iron Man suit. Acting out these scenes, often climactic scenes, was not easy. He described it as, quote, "Oh, the most important woman in your life is falling off a crane into a fiery pit, okay? So let's just rehearse once, and then we'll do it about 10 or 12 times until the camera is right and you've given enough," end quote. He said that the directors were just screaming direction at you. It's like irritation therapy. Brie Larson's all-powerful Captain Marvel faced an unusual, unexpected challenge. Goose. Not an actual goose that honks and flies in a V, we're talking about her cat. Although Captain Marvel the character is certainly not one to be defeated by a house pet, let alone Thanos, Brie Larson the actor is allergic. She said that, quote, "It became this joke because the crew would watch me all day doing crazy stunts, but then the cat showed up on set and I was like, we need to have a plan. We need to have a conversation," end quote. How did they get around this one? Well, a lot of what you see of Goose and Captain Marvel is actually CGI. And when they needed something physical to lend weight to the proceedings, they used a lifelike puppet. However, all the cat people out there know that there's nothing like the real thing, and so every once in a while, they'd have to bring in a live cat, an old tabby cat named Reggie. True story. Working for Marvel isn't just big paychecks and superhero costumes. What scenes would you like to see explained? Did we miss any that you know of? Let us know in the comments and be sure to subscribe to ScreenRant.